Welcome guys, this is Alexium from Alexium Plays. This is your channel for Raid Shadow Legends videos, and today we're gonna be talking about Hydra Clash. Last time we had a little bit of time. We talked about my Nightmare team. Today we're gonna be talking about what I did for my Brutal Key and what were my biggest takeaways from what I learned on Hydra Clash. Since this is our first Hydra Clash, one thing to note that I'm really happy about is, as you guys can see, our clan did a really good performance for the first one. Right now we're in second spot. First, second, and third are pretty close together. Fourth and fifth are pretty far away. I don't see, unless they pull some Corpulent Cadaver teams, I don't know that they can uh, get into striking distance from first, second, and third. But we're out there. We still, everyone has a couple of keys in there. I know the first team still hasn't used all their keys, and they're 3 people down. So if all of us hit, we might even win. But it's getting pretty out there. I did see that they have pretty big um, teams, so they did quite good too, and they have a lot of Acrisias running around in their teams and a lot of abusing drone dust. So we'll see what happens on the next Hydro Clash, but definitely the drone dust are just running rampant out there, and the Corpulent Cadavers. I didn't see a lot of our people doing the exploit for the Acrisia teams, or maybe they did. See, I see one there. So yeah, so there's everyone. Well, he's using it on Nightmare, so he's not using it on normal. But yeah, everyone's doing their best effort. I'm pretty happy where we at. But let's talk about how are we doing so much damage, right? Last time that we talked about my team for Nightmare, I was pretty excited because Lil and me were at the top right now of our clan, which I'm very impressed by everyone's performance. But I'm pretty happy that our first 2 spots right now for damage don't have Acrisias on them. Not talking anything bad about Acrisias. If I had an Acrisia, I would also be using it. But in the meantime, I don't. And as you can see, third spot right there is super close to Lil. It's an Acrisia team. Uh, which is a super powerful champion. But we'll see. I'm just really happy with the outcome of everyone. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is how do we start pushing those big numbers? Because before we didn't have any um, incentive of push anything past a 1 key, so everyone just using their Duchess teams and trying to put like as much damage in there. You pair your Duchess with your Krisk, and then you put as much damage as you can, and then you 1 key, and then you would call it a day, right? But now when we get into the end game and the Hydra Clash is out, it is a really good, I think, model for in-game players to show off their accounts and push their accounts to the limit. Because sometimes most of the content that when it comes out, like the Shogun Grove and all this other stuff, when it comes out, most of the end-game players that we've been playing for 3-4 years, this game, we probably clear most of the stages within the first few hours, and then we wait until one of the big content creators comes out with a comp, and then we copy it, and then we just farm it until we get our gear upgraded. And that was the case with most of the people with Shogun Grove. We fairly easily cleared it in the first week, and now we're just having on farm, right? But now this content, where is a type of player versus player, clan versus clan competition, it generates content for everyone, because now we're competing, trying to see how can we use the best champions on our account. What combinations of different champions can we get? Because now we're not trying to hit that 30 mil for the Hydra Brutal, right? Now we're trying to push as high numbers as we can, and now that's a different ballpark of game of how do we. It gives a different life to what the Hydra means for the game, right? Because before it didn't matter. It didn't matter what champions you were using as long as you were 1 king. Now it does matter. Now we're going to be pushing high numbers and learning what are the best strategies, what are the best compositions, where can we optimize, right? Optimization. How do, as an end game player, I can push my account to the limit, my gear to the limit. Where can I keep farming for the best result, best damage, right? So now it's not about how hard can I have my nukers hit, right? Because we're still cap at 10% for max damage. Now we're trying to see, okay, so what are my supports needs to be? How are my buffs lining up? How my debuffs are lining up? How can I get better control? Control. That's a big portion of how we start pushing up to bigger numbers on Hydra, over 100 millions, right? Uh, so my biggest takeaway, and as you guys can see it here, this is my top team, right? Before I used to run something similar to this team here, except instead of running Geomancer, I was running Attila. That's right here. Because she brings Hex, Burns, and Healing. But now I changed my comp a little bit to where now I don't use Duchess. I've effectively retired Duchess from my teams. Not because she's a bad champion, she's just not very conducive to big numbers. She is very good keeping your team alive. But the more endgame you are in Hydra, the less protection you need for your champions, because your champion, you're not using Royal Guards up here and in Nightmare and Brutal. That's if you, and maybe there are some, but as you guys can see, most of the people are just running around with their husks and their Acrisius and more husks in here. There's one Royal Guard, the one Royal Guard here. As you guys can see, not a lot of squishy AoE max HP. That was the only one in our list here, it seems. And the reason is because he's too squishy, and he when you run a Royal Guard, you're having to build a lot of babysitting from your other support champions. Now I lost the Royal Guard. Where is he? There's so little of them that I lost them. I can't find him. Right here, Chloe round 1. The problem with Royal Guard is the because he's so squishy, because he's an attack-based champion, you have to start running a bunch of other supports to keep him alive. I bet Chloe here run probably a full manual key just to keep him alive and be able to optimize his damage, which is really good. But once we start trying to like full auto and just semi auto the run just to clicking heads, or maybe we take control on certain parts, we start looking at more tanky champions. That's why Husk is so good, and why Nude is so good, just because the same stats that you're building to have him do damage is also the ones that are keeping him alive, because they're defensive and HP nuker, same as also Michinaki. That's why Michinaki is so good. It's also because he brings Hex and brings a bunch of different buffs, right? But now, because we don't need the Duchess to keep our team alive, and not a lot of our champions are dying at the same time, or we barely have any champions die, Duchess loses a lot of value, because she does still brings that speed aura. She also still brings that veil, but she's not helping with the primary way of how we are outputting so much damage and so much control. And the way that we do that is increase speed. Yep, that's right. It's so simple as that. That's one of the reasons why Nekmotar is the best champion right now for any team. You can slide Nekmotar in any team, and he brings increased speed, decreased speed, leech, and decreased attack, and all this other speed boosting and all this other stuff. The way that we're pushing out so much damage is increasing how many turns we're taking, because you can't, because of the 10% of how max damage you're dealing out, it doesn't matter if you have 250 crit damage or you have 300 crit damage on your Nude or your Husk, because you're still dealing exactly the same damage per turn. So now, instead of focusing on outputting more damage, explosive damage in one turn, we are focusing on, okay, so you're gonna limit me on 10% each hit, right, for my HP nuke. Well, what I have to do is get back to my cooldown and do it again, right? So now we're trying to take as many turns as possible as we can in between the Hydra staking turns, right? Now, how do we achieve this? I am very convinced, and this is the big takeaway. The biggest important buff that you're gonna be putting out is increased speed. I know a lot of people focus a lot on decreased speed, but as you guys can see here, the only person in my team specifically that can put decreased speed is Krisk, and he's only doing it on his A1, right? And now you ask, oh, it's like, okay, Elixir, well, how do you keep that up all the time? Well, the thing is, if you're going so fast and overlapping, let's say my Krisk takes 5 turns between each one of the Hydra heads, right? That means that my Krisk has 5 times to put that decrease speed for 2 turns, 5 times on each head, right? So now, if you have a champion that can actually put it through a skill, right, and push it out on a frequent cooldown, that is enough, right? The problem with increased speed is that because you're taking so many turns, you're burning it off from your champions, right? And my biggest takeaway from Hydra Clash is if you want to output a lot of damage, you need to keep increased speed on all the time. The moment your increased speed falls off from your champions, that is the moment that the Hydra heads start catching up with you and taking a lot of turns, outputting a lot of damage to you, and you don't have a lot of time in between heads to be able to heal up, right? So as you can see, yeah, my Chris is doing a lot to keep my team alive, but there's not a lot of outside of Chris um, of that much healing in terms of burst healing. Ugo has it on a 4 turn, which she does because of her. I built her on Relentless, so she can take a lot of more turns. But what you don't want it to happen is you don't want all the heads to take turns in between you taking turns. So if your 6 champions take a turn and then all the Hydras take their turn, you're most likely gonna start seeing a lot of people dying very quickly, right? But now if one head takes a turn and 4 of your champions take a turn, now they're healing. They're getting ready for their next attack, attacking champions and killing through your leeches, dealing more damage, maybe almost freeing one of your champions that got eaten. So the key here is you don't want to have a Hydra head start taking turns back to back. You want all the Hydra heads to start being spaced out, and the way you do that is keeping increased speed on yourself and keeping decreased speed on them. Keeping decreased speed on head, as I mentioned, is not as hard as you think on the Hydra heads because they're not taking as many turns. So you are taking more turns than them. So debuffs are a lot easier to keep on them than you keeping a full spread of coverage of your buffs on yourself, right? And one of them being increased speed, which is being the most important one, you want to have them on a 3-turn cooldown. And that is, to me, the minimum requirement. I know there's a lot of people who run champions like Lady Kimi or other champions that have increased speed on a 4-turn cooldown. I think that is not enough unless you come into play with a speed booster to compensate for that, or you build. Maybe you can get away with that if you build like 350 speed on that specific champion. So basically, you're trying to compensate for that cooldown being on a 4-turn cooldown, having to overlap all your other champions so quickly, so you can replenish that before all your other champions take turns again. And that is the big problem with bringing other champions with only increased speed on a 4-turn cooldown. Another sneaky thing you can do is come in there with a buff extender and basically extend that by another turn, and then it comes down to a 3-turn cooldown. But if you're doing that, then you can also say, well, I can just bring a 3-turn cooldown increase speed, like let's say Elva, and increase it by one more turn, and now I have a full turn, a 3-turn increase speed. So that means by the time it falls off, my Elva, who's the fastest in this team, is gonna put it up again, and then my Chris is gonna extend it. So throughout this whole fight, there's not a single moment where I'm not going way faster than the Hydra heads, right? And that is the beauty of that. It has to do a lot with composition, yes, but if you can keep that up, there's a lot more flexibility in terms of avoiding losing control of the heads, basically. If you, because one of the biggest problem is the head of decay cleansing your debuffs, but guess what? If your Chris is going at least 3 times before the head of decay takes a turn, and your Husk is also taking turns, the chances of you being able to place that provoke on it is really high. right? Even if you're just running provoke sets, right? Because that's a 30% chances to provoke. Well, if you're taking 4 turns in between the head of the K taking a turn, what is the likelihood of you being able to provoke it, right? So that is the reason why that is the key to being able to push hundreds of millions of damage in your team. Now, how does this team that I'm presenting here works? I know I see there's 2 Void Champions, but outside of the 2 Void Champions, and I'm going to show you my brutal key, my hard key, because it's a similar concept, slightly different. Doesn't have a crisp, but it has a substitution there. Venus is there as a Void Champion. I just needed someone who would bring burn and decrease defense. So if you have a Cecilia, that's a good replacement. Or if you don't care about the weekend, you can also bring an Artak in that position, and that's really good because she will bring Artak will bring a decreased attack, a burn, and then you can put him also on a provoke or a curse set, and that way you're also pushing hex. So the Venus right here is not built with any damage outside of Brimstone and War Master. Most of that damage is coming from that curse set. So a lot of people say, oh, curse set is not that good. It's only blah 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 blah. Well, my Venus has no damage stats and she did 30 million. So I guess I don't know. Numbers speak for themselves. I have an extra damage dealer for free in my team. So she basically competed with my Husk, who that Husk has 270 crit damage. My Nut has 374. Sorry, 274 crit damage. So the 2 champions that are over 250 crit damage, and my Venus is still competing with them for damage. Obviously, that's accounting for a portion of their damage because she's basically stealing it with the Hex, and a portion of it is burns and War Masters. But for a champion that has no crit damage stats on it, that's pretty impressive, right? And also following up with that, since I'm taking so many turns, Chris is also putting up some damage just because of War Master procs. Now this team specifically, now let's talk about what I did for my key. Elva is really good. Let's go and check out those champions. And I'm trying to be as quick as possible because I know I wasted a lot of time with the theory behind the team. But here's why I think Alva, when you're trying to push more damage, is better than a Duchess in your team. First of all, she brings a block debuff, which is one of the main reasons why you bring a Duchess, is just to prevent debuffs to being spread on your team. Increase speed on a 3-turn cooldown, so that's really brilliant, and also a full cleanse. Duchess doesn't bring a full cleanse, so you're getting a cleanse, putting block debuff so you don't get many more debuffs on yourself, and increase speed. This is really especially important because as you guys could see, I didn't bring any counters to the head of Mischief. So if I get fears on myself, I'm going fast to mitigate turns that I lack taking. And then also if my one thing that I've been big on and I like doing is bringing at least 2 people who can cleanse on my team. So in this case would be Ugo, which I'm not gonna go over this time because I went on about her the last time, which is the same champion. So basically, Ugo brings a small cleanse, only 1 debuff, or that normally is enough if you have block debuff out too. Because yes, you're getting the fear out, but you're not getting other let's say poisons and provokes on your champions because you have block debuffs. The fear will go through on your champions, right? But Ugo, because that's the only debuff that they have, will cleanse it. So that way we have a way to semi counter the head without having to bring a bunch of foils, having to bring a Shamael, or having to bring Veils, Perfect Veils, and all these other shenanigans that I think, yeah, they're good and they mitigate damage, but it's not really helping you out that much. And sometimes if you get 4 or 5 hits of Mischief in a run and you don't have a Shamael, you're better off resetting your key anyways. So it's pretty pointless at that point. The other reason we bring her is because she has a single target revive, which is really strong because they come in here with 40% HP, 50% turn meter, and then she plays increased defense and increased attack, which is really good because I don't bring champions that are attack based into Hydra, at least on Brutal and Nightmare, but increased defense is really good because If one of my champions dies, if they're a defense-based nuker, they're already ready to make to deal damage. And also, if it's just someone else who died, at least they come with a layer of protection outside of also having 50% of their turn meter and 40% of the HP. Another reason why she's really good is because every time someone takes a turn, she's healing them by 10%, which is no joke. Especially if you build her really fast. If your Elva, if you get smacked by the head of Wrath, and before the head of Wrath taking a turn, your Elva takes 4 turns, that means that your whole team is healed by 40%. And this is not on a cooldown. So every time someone takes a turn, or those champions take, sorry, I said Elva takes a turn, but if your champions are taking turns, they're getting here by 10%. Now, the other thing that she does is that every time she takes a turn, she puts a perfect veil on one champion um, in her turn, and that is outside of also in her first skill places a 15% continuous heal buff for 2 turns on the ally with the lowest HP. Right now, why she is really good on this team, and I like to pair her with Krisk more than I would like to pair my Duchess with the Krisk, is because Krisk, and this is not just with Krisk, it can work with any ally protection. When you get smacked, your ally protector is gonna take the biggest hit, so he's gonna be the one with the lowest HP, right? The nice interaction between the two of them is that the problem with Elva, and the same problem with that has this other chick from the Devils, where is she? This one right here, Wither the Crown. The reason why a lot of people don't use Wither the Crown on Hydra is because they become a liability, because whoever is taking the most damage then now becomes the target for that for those buffs, and now they become the mischief tank, and you don't want to get your buff stolen, right? Well, the nice thing about Krisk is because Krisk will probably be your debuff tank, because he has so many unique buffs on himself. He's gonna put increased defense on himself, and then he's gonna put a continuous heal on himself too. So that means that he has 2 unique buffs onto himself, right? But when he takes that smack and he takes, let's say, 20% of his HP right off, when Elva takes a turn, now she puts a veil and another continuous heal on top of him. So now he has 4 different unique buffs on himself that first are gonna help him not die because he's taking so much damage, and secondly, is gonna make him an even stronger mischief tank. Now, the other even better interaction is, now that that has happened, and you have 4 different buffs on yourself, if he comes around before this expires, and because he gets a reset, and takes another turn, that means that now those 4 buffs get extended. So now, when I was doing this run, it would come to some times where he had 8 buffs on himself, just because all the continuous heal kept stacking on himself, because he was taking so much damage from the ally protection, right? So that is a really neat interaction between the two of them, because now you've taken the drawback of using Elva on Hydra and make it into a positive with Krisk. And as I said, you can do this with any ally protector. It just works a little bit better with Krisk. You can do this also with Sneak Track, because Sneak Track also has a ally protection and healing himself, so he's also a mischief tank. And now he also, when he gets attacked, puts leech on the Hydra heads. So that's a really good interaction, and there's a substitution. So anyone who has an ally protection can do this. It just works better if that ally protector is also a debuff tank at the same time, and you can force that a little bit if you use some blood shields accessory on your ally protector, but that's a little tip and trick. So here, that's the second thing that is a takeaway from your video, from my video, if you've stayed here so far. The other thing that Chris is doing here is providing a increased speed on everyone. So Elva's already doing it, but if at any given moment it falls off, the increased speed is there. This is not the reason why he's here. He's more here for the provoke and the ally protection and the decreased speed, because he does so many things, right? But the nice thing is the increased speed is not necessary on here. So you can substitute Krisk with a Nia, because you don't necessarily need the increased speed from him because Elva's already providing it, right? Now, what I was saying with decreased speed, you don't need a champion with an active skill that can place decreased speed as long as you're overlapping the Hydra head so fast that you can just place it, just take it based on doing A1s, right? And that is really neat because, as I said, because you're taking so many turns, the decreased speed is not gonna fall as often as your increased speed will, right? The other thing that Chris does, everyone knows about it. Every time he gets hit, he has a chance of putting out decreased attack and decreased defense out there. You can, as I say, this passive is really helpful. It's really inconsistent because it's only 50% here. I think, what is it? Chance of placing 75, 60. So it's a 70% chance. You can increase it with books. Um, you can use other champions to put decrease speed, decrease defense. We'll go in here to put in that, and then decrease attack you can get from any other champion. So I know Chris is one of those big champions is a void champion that's really hard to get, but there's substitutions for him. It's just convenient because when you put Chris, you can start adding a bunch of other champions in there that you normally wouldn't, just because he brings a lot to the table. And I like when I build my teams, I build redundancy. So I normally don't bring just one champion that puts decreased attack. I don't bring just one champion that brings decreased defense. However, I did bring only one champion that puts decreased speed out there, right? So that's pretty neat. The other thing I did is Lightning Cage. As I said last time, Lightning Cage is another. If there's a buff, if there's a new head that's bounced, if Rathic does his big counter attack and puts a buff on himself, he gets a Lightning Cage. He becomes an even better debuff tanker, right? Now let's go back to our handy dandy list of champions that we're taking a look at. Outside of that, Venus is here just to bring decreased defense weaken. So that, as you guys can see, Chris, Venus, and Ugo puts decreased defense here. Newt also does. I shut off my A1 for Newt, but Venus, she puts burns, weaken and decreased defense, and also have her built on a curse set, because any champion that has 2 AoE attacks on here, their kit are going to be really good on provoke or curse. As you guys can see, also my Chris is built on a provoke set, just specifically for that. The Chris is really hard to build with a provoke set, but it's really worth it. But if you can only build your Chris or whoever on perception, do that. If you bring Nia is gonna be a really hard build, but it is a viable substitution. You will have to build her on a provoke set to make this work, and you will have to bring a lot of other champions in provoke set to make this work. If I would have brought Nia here, I probably would have built Venus on a provoke set too. I would probably have built a bunch of other champions in provoke sets too, just to help out with that. Elva right now, as you guys can see, she's built just for Ice Golem, so she's only on Defiant and Healing. If I would probably build her on Relentless if I needed or actually I would have built her on Reflex, just to keep that cleanses and speed buff up even more time. And then all the other people that we see here, Ugo, we already spoken about. She's a healer, cleanser, and decrease debuff and decrease defense and block debuff. Husk is my favorite HP nuker for Hydra, just because he has a provoke on his A1, which is very useful, especially because I turn off his A3. So he only has 2 things he can do. He can either do his A1 and try to provoke head of decay, or he can do his AoE nuke. And if it takes a turn, whenever he's taking a turn, he has a chance to cool down because of the reflex. Newt is one of those controversial champions. I think he's okay. I think Husk is technically better. He is the one thing that he is really, really good at is freeing your champions, as long as you have Hex out, because he can one hit take out your champions out of being eaten. So that is very very important and very good. His one drawback why I say he's not as good as some people make him to be for Hydra specifically is because a lot of his value is being able to put with his A1 putting decreased attack, weaken, and putting a counter attack on himself. My problem with him is that when he does that, he becomes a bigger target for the head of mischief. And if you get unlucky and you get 3%ed and get that stolen, you will wipe. If that gets spread out and you don't have a way to take it back and take it up from Wrath, if that buff gets onto Wrath, you will definitely wipe, especially when you're over 150 turn count on the Hydra heads. So that's why I have to turn off his A1. His A2. I have tried him on an Oela build and I have pretty good gear, and it did not work. It works for, I know there's been some teams out there on YouTube. I tried those builds. I even over geared them for those specific champions, and it's really inconsistent just because the 3%. If the 3% wasn't in Raid Shadow Legends, yes, it is very viable. But in the meantime, because if you get 3% and that gets spread out on a 1 hour run, you will not be happy after an hour run and your buff gets stolen and you just wipe. It's okay. So that is my team for Nightmare. As you guys can see, did pretty respectable damage. I could probably, that was my first try and I just saved it. I probably should have tried it again, and I'm pretty sure it could have pushed at least 130 mil. But I was a little bit short on time. Some things that I'm probably going to be doing is substituting. I'm probably going to take Venus out here because I don't feel like she is intrinsic to the team. At least if I keep her here, I'll probably build her with a little bit of crit rate, crit damage to maybe push like 40-50 mil on her. But I would like to pair her with the Cupidus that I just got. So she's probably gonna be the one person that I think is gonna just in here technically for just the HP burns and Hex. So she's very replaceable. I hope that you guys have learned as much as I have learned from Hydra Clash and taking something away from this video. It's been a pleasure having you guys, and on to the next one. This has been Alexion Plays. Thank you for being here. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down the comment box. I'll see you guys later, and this has been Alexion. Bye.